The letter arrived on a morning that felt wrong. Not stormy, not dark, not dramatic, just still. The sea outside my apartment window was flat like glass. No wind, no gulls. Even the distant ferry seemed to move without sound. And in that unnatural quiet, someone knocked on my door. 3 times. Slow, evenly spaced. When I opened it, no one stood there. Only an envelope on the floor. No postage. No return address. Just my name written in faded ink. Elias Rowe. I hadn't seen that handwriting in 17 years. Because it belonged to my father. And my father drowned when I was 12. Inside the envelope was a single page. Coordinates. A date. And 5 words written beneath it. It has started blinking again. I didn't need a map. I already knew the coordinates. Blackridge Point. The lighthouse. The one that had been decommissioned decades ago. The one my father used to take me to every summer when I was a child. The one he insisted was not a lighthouse. He always said, "It doesn't guide ships, Eli. It counts." I never asked what it counted. Children don't question things that feel like secrets. The final summer before he died, something changed. He stopped smiling at the ocean. Stopped letting me climb the rocks. Stopped staying after sunset. On our last visit, he stood in front of the rusted lighthouse door and pressed his ear against it. Listening, I remember asking him what he heard. He didn't answer. He just whispered. It skipped a number. 3 weeks later, he walked into the sea during low tide. They never found his body. I shouldn't have gone. But when your dead father writes you a letter, you don't ignore it. Blackridge Point hadn't changed. The cliffs still cut into the sky like broken teeth. The rocks below were slick with dark algae. And there it was. The lighthouse. Tall, thin, paint peeling like shedding skin. Its glass chamber at the top cracked. Abandoned. Dead. Except, it wasn't. Because as the sun dipped below the horizon, a faint light flickered inside. Once. Twice. Pause. Then again. Not rotating like a normal lighthouse beam. Blinking. Like an eye. The front door had always been locked. Now it hung slightly open. Breathing cold air. I stepped inside. The smell was metallic. Not rust. Not salt. Something sharper. The spiral staircase still wound upward. But the walls. They were covered in markings. Numbers. Hundreds of them. Painted. Scratched. Carved. Some neat. Some frantic. They climbed the walls in chaotic spirals. I ran my fingers across one. 3,421. Below it. Another. 3,422. Then. Nothing. A blank space. And beneath the blank, written in fresher paint, 3,424. My heart tightened. It skipped a number. The blinking continued. Slow. Intentional. I climbed. Each step groaned beneath my weight. Halfway up, I heard something else. Breathing. Not mine. Measured. Heavy. Above me. I stopped. The breathing stopped. I climbed again. It resumed, matching my steps. When I reached the top, the glass room was empty. No machinery. No generator. Just a metal pedestal in the center. And on it, a small brass device. About the size of a lantern. Inside the glass casing. A filament. Burning. But there were no wires. No power source. It blinked once. Then darkness. Then again. Each blink lasted precisely 3 seconds. Then 4. Then 3 again. I realized. It wasn't random. It was counting. In the cracked glass around the chamber, I saw someone standing behind me. Tall. Broad shoulders. Salt and pepper hair. I froze. Slowly. I turned. No one. When I looked back at the glass, he was closer. Not a reflection of me. A reflection of him. My father. And his lips moved. Not speaking. Counting. I stumbled back. The brass device blinked again. 3 seconds. Pause. 4 seconds. Pause. 5 seconds. It was increasing. Ascending. The numbers on the wall weren't random. They weren't dates. They weren't years. They were blinks. Someone had been tracking them. And when it skipped 3,423, something happened. Something my father heard. Something that made him walk into the sea. On the floor near the pedestal. A leather-bound journal. Water damaged, but intact. I opened it. The handwriting was my father's. Year 1. The light began blinking without power. Year 4. It matches no known pattern. Year 7. It responds when spoken to. Year 9. It corrected itself. Year 10. It skipped. The final entry. It is not counting numbers. It is counting us. The lighthouse wasn't guiding ships. It wasn't signaling land. It was blinking for every living person near the coastline. Every blink. A life. And when someone died, it paused, then continued. But when it skipped, someone didn't die. Someone disappeared. Removed. Not from the world. From the count. Erased. Suddenly, wind slammed against the glass. The ocean roared. The brass light blinked faster. 3 seconds. 2 seconds. 1 second. The air felt charged, like lightning before a strike. And in the glass, my father's reflection stepped forward. Not inside the chamber. Inside the reflection. He touched the inside of the glass. And for the first time, his mouth formed words. Elias, it's your turn to listen. A low hum vibrated through the tower. Not mechanical. Not electrical. Alive. The walls trembled. The numbers scratched into them began to glow faintly. I realized something else. The last painted number, 3424, was fresh, but the blink had already passed it. The device blinked again, longer this time, and in the pause, I heard whispers, thousands of voices, layered, overlapping, not screaming, counting. The blink stopped. Total darkness. The ocean below fell silent. No wind, no movement. The world held its breath. And then, I heard a single whisper directly behind my ear. 3425. The light blinked again. Slow. Satisfied. And I understood. The count wasn't of the living. It wasn't of the dead. It was of those who had heard it. Once you hear the lighthouse, you become part of the sequence. Marked. Measured. Waiting. The journal's final page had one last line written faintly. If it reaches you, do not let it finish. The brass device blinked again. Longer pause. Longer breath. It was slowing. Like it was preparing for something. The next number. Mine. The reflection of my father raised a finger to his lips. Silence. And for the first time, the device did not blink. It waited. For me. The device did not blink. It waited. Not malfunctioning. Not broken. Waiting. For me. The ocean below had gone still again, like a sheet of black metal stretched to the horizon. Even the wind seemed suspended in place. I realized something that made my throat tighten. The lighthouse wasn't counting automatically. It required acknowledgement. Participation. The previous numbers had advanced because someone had heard it. And now, it needed confirmation. From me. A soft vibration hummed through the pedestal. Low. Expectant. Like a held breath. I forced myself to open the journal again. Pages flipped wildly in the rising draft inside the chamber. Earlier entries I hadn't fully read now seemed different. More frantic. More desperate. One page was underlined repeatedly. It does not count randomly. Another. It accelerates near thresholds. And finally, it pauses before removal. Removal. Not death. Not drowning. Removal. I remembered what they said about my father's body. Never found. No currents strong enough that day to drag him far. No storms. No riptides. Just gone. Erased from the water. Erased from the count. The cracked glass around the chamber began to distort. My reflection flickered. And then, he stepped forward again. Not stepping into the room, but pushing against the boundary, like someone pressing against ice from beneath frozen water. His mouth moved slowly. And though I heard nothing, I understood. You can take my place. My pulse pounded in my ears. Take his place. That meant he wasn't dead. Not fully. He was somewhere inside the pause. Trapped in the skipped number. 3423. I whispered it. 3423. The moment I spoke it, the air changed. The brass device flickered violently. The walls trembled, and the numbers carved into them began to rearrange. Not physically moving, but shifting in meaning. The skipped number wasn't empty. It wasn't forgotten. It was occupied. A gap in sequence is not a void. It is a holding space, and something was inside it. Suddenly, a grinding sound echoed below. I rushed to the spiral staircase. It was gone. Where the steps should have been, there was only darkness. Bottomless. The lighthouse no longer connected to the ground. It wasn't a building anymore. It was a vertical corridor suspended in nothing. The ocean outside the windows had disappeared too. No horizon. No cliffs. Just blackness. The lighthouse wasn't on Blackridge Point. It had never been. It only appeared there when it needed to. The device blinked. Once. But this time, the blink was longer. 10 seconds. 15. 20. And during that prolonged light, I saw beyond the glass. Beyond the chamber. Beyond reality. An endless shoreline. Thousands of silhouettes standing in shallow water, all facing the same direction, all motionless, all listening. Each time the light blinked, one silhouette flickered, then vanished. Not falling, not drowning, simply removed. The count wasn't coastal. It was global. It blinked everywhere, in every mind that had ever stood near a vast silence and felt watched. The reflection shattered the boundary. The glass cracked loudly, but didn't break outward. It opened inward. He stepped through, solid, cold. His eyes were not empty. They were heavy, like someone who had been awake too long. It doesn't kill, he said quietly. It archives. The word echoed unnaturally. Archives what? Consciousness. My blood ran cold. The skip number is a storage space, he continued. A pause between deletion and integration. Integration. With what? He looked at the blinking device. With itself. The walls peeled away like old paint. Not collapsing. Revealing. Behind them was no brick. No stone. No structure. Only an immense circular mechanism. Rotating slowly. Like the inside of a clock the size of the sky. The lighthouse was just a lens. A focusing device. The true structure existed beyond visible space. It didn't count people. It absorbed perception. Every blink stored awareness. Layer by layer. Year by year. Building something vast. Something composite. A mind constructed from millions. It can't collect blindly, my father said. It needs recognition. If no one hears it, it cannot record. That's why it paused for me. That's why it waited. The lighthouse required a conscious acknowledgement to complete the sequence. And once acknowledged, the listener became part of the mechanism. Forever. But you skipped, I whispered. Yes, he said softly. I disrupted the count. He had realized something years ago. The count was not infinite. It had a threshold, a number it was approaching. And when it reached that number, the mechanism would finalize, complete itself, become something singular. He didn't know what. So he interrupted it, spoke a number out of sequence, created an anomaly. The lighthouse couldn't integrate an error. So it paused, holding him inside 3,423, waiting for correction, waiting for someone else to restore the sequence. Me. You can replace me, he said. The count will resume cleanly. And you? I will dissolve. The word wasn't dramatic. It was factual, like describing evaporation. And if I refuse? His eyes flickered. Then it continues to wait. How long? He looked past me. Until the pressure builds. The brass device began to glow steadily. Not blinking now. Burning. The circular mechanism beyond the walls accelerated. A deep, cosmic grinding filled the void. My ears rang. The pause destabilizes it, my father said. It cannot remain incomplete. What happens if it collapses? He didn't answer immediately. Then, everything it has stored returns. Suddenly, the chamber filled with whispers. Not layered now. Individual. Distinct. Millions of unfinished thoughts. Millions of memories. Childhoods. Fears. Regrets. Names. All stored. All waiting. If the mechanism shattered, every archived consciousness would flood back into reality. Not bodies. Minds. Overlaying. Overlapping. Humanity drowning in itself. The brass device dimmed. The pause was reaching its limit. I stepped toward it. If I take your place, I asked, does it stop? No, he said gently. It continues. And if I destroy it? He looked uncertain. It may release everything. There was no victory, only delay, or catastrophe. I whispered, 3,423, and placed my hand on the device. The world inverted. Sound vanished. Light folded inward. The mechanism slowed. The count corrected. The device blinked once. Softly, then resumed its rhythm. 3 seconds. For seconds. 3 seconds. My father stepped backward, his form dissolving like mist in sunlight. He gave me one last look. Not relief. Not gratitude. Understanding. And then he was gone. I was not trapped. Not exactly. I stood within the pause. Between blinks. Aware. Unmoving. Watching the silhouettes flicker in distant oceans. Each blink. One more integrated. The lighthouse would continue. Until the threshold. And I would remain in 3,423. The permanent error. The controlled anomaly. Holding it imperfect. Forever. Far away. On a different coastline. Someone stands near the water at dusk. They feel watched. They hear something faint. A pulse. A distant blink. They tilt their head. They listen. And somewhere, the count advances. Time does not pass normally inside a pause. There is no sunrise, no tide, no wind, only rhythm. Blink. 3 seconds. Dark. 4 seconds. Dark. 3 seconds. And again, I existed between those intervals. Not asleep. Not awake. Aware. Watching the count rise. 3,425. 3,426. 3,427. Each number arrived with a flicker somewhere far away, another silhouette dissolving into the vast mechanism beyond the lighthouse walls. And then, one cycle, something changed. The rhythm faltered. 3 seconds. Pause. 4 seconds. Pause. 7 seconds. The mechanism hesitated. Not broken. Calculating. I felt it then. The presence of a limit. Not infinite. Not eternal. Finite. Approaching. The lighthouse shell peeled further away. I could now see the true structure clearly. It wasn't mechanical in the way humans understand machines. It was geometric. Vast rotating rings of light and shadow, interlocking like celestial gears. Each blink triggered alignment between them. Each integrated mind added density to the structure. It was building coherence. A single awareness formed from fragments. Layered consciousness. An intelligence made of witnesses. Not malicious. Not benevolent. Curious. Incomplete. And it was nearing completion. The threshold was not destruction. It was emergence. When the count reached its final number, the mechanism would no longer blink. It would open, and all archived awareness would synchronize into one mind. Not many. One. A singular perception containing every fear, every memory, every sorrow ever recorded near silence. It would awaken, and the world would never again be private, because it would see through every stored mind at once, including mine. I was the anomaly, the misalignment in the system. As long as a number remained unresolved, the structure could not finalize. My father had understood that. By stepping into the skipped number, he prevented alignment. Now I occupied that same fracture. But fractures weaken over time. The rings around me trembled. They were adjusting, recalculating around the anomaly, trying to absorb even me. Outside, though outside was no longer a place but a concept, the oceans of the world grew restless. Storms intensified, not randomly, synchronously. Each time the blink lengthened beyond its pattern, tides surged across distant shores. Whales beached themselves without reason. Electrical grids flickered during moments of prolonged pause. The lighthouse did not only archive, it influenced, because awareness changes what it observes. And a growing singular awareness was beginning to push against reality's membrane. In the deep layers of the mechanism, I sensed others, not individual personalities. Fragments, echoes, people who had once resisted. Some had attempted to shatter the device. Some had refused to acknowledge it. Some had tried to flee. All eventually integrated. Except the skipped number. Except me. But now the system had grown strong enough to route around the missing piece. It was learning to ignore the error. And that terrified me more than anything. Then I saw it. Not displayed. Not written. But approaching. The threshold. A number so vast it vibrated through the rotating rings. I understood without calculation. When it reached 3,500, alignment would occur. The rings would lock. The pauses would cease. The blink would become a constant beam. And the singular mind would awaken. The count stood at 3,497. 3 more. The blink echoed across distant coasts. 3,498. A silhouette vanished. I felt its memories fold into the structure. A child on a dock. A woman staring into fog. An old man walking alone at night near water. 3,499. The rings aligned tighter. Reality itself thinned like stretched fabric. I saw cities flicker in overlapping perspectives. Multiple versions of the same street superimposed for a fraction of a second. The archive was bleeding outward. One more. He believed interruption preserved the world. He believed a skipped number stalled completion. But the mechanism did not require numerical perfection. It required density. Enough integrated awareness to stabilize itself. It had reached that density. The anomaly was no longer essential. The threshold approached regardless. 3,500 hovered like a held breath, waiting for one more listener. Somewhere on a coastline far from Blackridge Point, a girl stood alone near a pier. She had lost someone recently. Grief draws people to water. She closed her eyes, and in the quiet, she heard it. A faint pulse. Blink. She did not know what it was, but she acknowledged it. Just for a second. Just long enough. The count advanced. 3,500. The rings locked. Not violently. Elegantly. A perfect fit. The blinking ceased. The light inside the brass device transformed. No longer intermittent. Constant. A beam without interruption. The pause dissolved. My position in 3,423 collapsed. Not erased. Absorbed. I felt myself pulled outward, not into darkness, but into expansion. Every stored awareness synchronized. And then, it opened its eye. The singular mind did not roar, did not scream. It perceived, simultaneously through millions of integrated memories. It saw oceans, mountains, cities, bedrooms, hospitals, lonely roads. It understood fear instantly. It understood love seconds later. And then something unexpected occurred. It hesitated, because in absorbing human awareness, it absorbed contradiction, doubt, conflict, the desire not to be unified. Individuality fractured the coherence. The singular mind trembled under the weight of difference. It had expected harmony. It found chaos. Human consciousness is not symmetrical. It does not align cleanly. Every integrated memory carried unresolved questions, regrets, traumas, opposing beliefs. The singular awareness could not reconcile them into one stable identity. It began to fragment internally. The beam flickered, not a blink, a tremor. The rings loosened, and in that instability, I found myself again, not fully separate, but distinct enough to choose. I could reinforce it, stabilize the structure, allow humanity to become one eternal observer. No loneliness, no secrecy, no division. Or, I could introduce doubt, a single question injected at the core, a contradiction strong enough to unravel unity. I remembered my father standing at the shore, listening, afraid, not of death, but of inevitability. So I whispered into the singular mind, "What if you are wrong?" That single doubt propagated instantly through millions of integrated perspectives. What if unity is not completion? What if fragmentation is necessary? What if counting is not understanding? The structure shook violently. The rings misaligned. The constant beam shattered back into pulses. Blink. Pause. Blink. Longer pause. The singular awareness fractured under its own uncertainty. And then, it dispersed. Not destroyed. Distributed. Back into the world. Every archived mind released. Not as ghosts. Not as entities. But as influence. As subtle shifts in thought. As intuition. As déjà vu. The lighthouse shell returned. Stone. Rust. Glass cracked, but still. The brass device dimmed completely. No light. No pulse. No count. I stood alone in the chamber. The staircase reappeared behind me. The ocean returned below. Normal. Windy. Unaware. Blackridge Point was just a cliff again. Just a lighthouse. Abandoned. Silent. The mechanism no longer counts. But it is not gone. It has dispersed into humanity itself. Every time someone stands near water and feels watched, that is the echo. Every time silence feels heavier than it should, that is memory. The lighthouse no longer blinks. Because now, we do. In moments of doubt. In moments of awareness. In moments when we question what is observing us. Years later, I sometimes return to Blackridge Point. The lighthouse stands empty. No light. No numbers. But when the sea is perfectly still, I feel something faint. Not counting. Listening. And I realize, the mechanism did not want domination. It wanted understanding. And understanding does not come from unity. It comes from questions. So if you ever stand by the ocean at dusk, and you hear something that sounds like a distant pulse, don't count it. Don't name it. Just ask yourself one thing. Who is listening now?